Sunday afternoon, May 3rd, 2026. The sun is out. It's a weekend. Students at Dnipro National University, one of Ukraine's oldest and most respected universities, are in their dormitory. Maybe studying, maybe eating, maybe just resting, finally getting a break from the stress of living through a war that has now entered its 5th year. And then a Russian missile hits their building. Not a military base, not a weapons factory, not a government building, a university dormitory, where students sleep, where students live, where students were supposed to be safe. A student is killed, others are injured. Emergency responders rush to the scene, evacuating people from the rubble while air raid sirens continue to wail across the city because the attack isn't over. While first responders are still pulling people from that dormitory, more Russian strikes are hitting other parts of Dnipro, other parts of Ukraine. This is not a war story. This is a crime story.
And today we're going to tell it in full. My name is your name. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because we cover this war the way it deserves to be covered. Honestly, in detail, without flinching. Let's get into it. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the details matter. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, 2026, Russian forces launched a targeted missile strike on the city of Dnipro. Among the targets hit was a dormitory building belonging to Dnipro National University, one of Ukraine's major educational institutions, home to thousands of students. Ukraine's Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko confirmed the attack and noted something critically important. This dormitory doesn't just house regular students. It also provides shelter to internally displaced persons, people who have already been forced from their homes by Russian attacks elsewhere in Ukraine, people who came to Dnipro seeking safety. Russia hit the one place those people thought they had found it. Initial reports indicated 2 people were injured, but as emergency teams worked through the rubble over the following hours, the picture darkened. A student was confirmed killed. At least 11 people were injured in the overall attack on Dnipro that day, including 2 children. Read that again. 2 children. Serhiy Lysak, the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, confirmed that a fire broke out as a result of the strike. Alongside the dormitory, a gymnasium and an administrative building were also damaged. His statement was simple and devastating. Unfortunately, there are casualties and injured everywhere. But the attack on Dnipro didn't stop at the university. Russian forces also struck the city's residential areas, causing widespread damage. 3 people were killed and 34 wounded across Dnipro in the full scope of the day's attacks. Missile debris fell on a passenger train, train number 52, running the Odessa-Zaporizhia route, as it passed through the Dnipropetrovsk region. All passengers were evacuated to shelters. Ukrainian railways scrambled to arrange a replacement train. Let's pause on that image for a moment. A passenger train. People traveling between cities, trying to live some version of a normal life in a country at war. Missile debris raining down on their train. Passengers evacuating into shelters while air raid alerts scream overhead. This is what daily life looks like in Ukraine in 2026. And the attack on the university dormitory sits at the center of all of it, because it captures, with devastating clarity, what Russia is actually targeting in this war. Not military objectives, people. I want you to think about who these students are, because it's easy to process this story as a series of statistics: 1 dead, 11 injured, a dormitory destroyed, and miss the human reality behind those numbers. Dnipro National University was founded in 1918. For over a century, it has educated scientists, engineers, lawyers, teachers, doctors. Its graduates have built Ukraine's infrastructure, served in its government, taught in its schools, and treated patients in its hospitals. Right now, many of its alumni are fighting on the front lines. The students in that dormitory on May 3rd were the next generation, young people who chose to stay in Ukraine, chose to pursue their education, their futures, their dreams, despite the war raging around them. Many of them had already lived through unimaginable stress. Since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukrainian students have had their lives turned completely upside down. Classes moved online. Air raid drills became part of the school day. Dorm rooms that used to be shared with friends from across the country became makeshift shelters during attacks. Study sessions interrupted by sirens. Exams taken in basements. And among those students were people who weren't even originally from Dnipro, internally displaced persons who had fled their own cities. From Kharkiv, bombed since day one. From Mariupol, now occupied. From Kherson, from Zaporizhia, from dozens of towns and villages that had been reduced to rubble by Russian strikes. They came to Dnipro because it was supposed to be safer, further from the front. A place where they could study, work, rebuild some piece of a normal life. And Russia followed them there. Russia struck their dormitory. Because here is the strategic reality that Russia's propaganda machine will never admit. Attacking civilians, attacking infrastructure, attacking universities. It's not accidental. It's not collateral damage. It is the strategy. The goal is to break morale, to make Ukrainian civilians so exhausted, so terrified, so desperate for the bombing to stop, that they will pressure their government to accept whatever terms Russia demands, no matter how unjust. That is what a missile aimed at a university dormitory is designed to do. It is designed to make students and their parents ask, is this worth it? Is staying worth it? And here is the answer that 4 years of this war have produced, from millions of Ukrainians. Yes, it is worth it. What happened on May 3rd did not happen in isolation. And to understand the full weight of that missile strike on a university dormitory, you need to understand what Dnipro has endured over the past 4 years. Dnipro, formerly known as Dnipropetrovsk, sits in central Ukraine along the Dnipro River. It is Ukraine's 4th largest city, a major industrial and educational hub. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, many people assumed Dnipro's distance from the front lines would keep it relatively safe. They were wrong. Russia has struck Dnipro repeatedly, relentlessly, and, by any honest assessment, deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure. On June 24, 2022, a single Russian strike killed 21 people and injured 279 others. 19 schools were damaged, 10 kindergartens, a vocational school, a music school, 8 medical facilities, a hospital, a dental clinic, 46 high-rise apartment buildings, 41 private homes, several dormitories, in one strike. On September 19th and 20th of 2022, Dnipro was hit again. Schools damaged, kindergartens hit, dormitories destroyed, 36 people injured. In January 2023, Russia struck an apartment building in Dnipro, killing 46 people and injuring 80 more. It was one of the deadliest single strikes of the entire war. Emergency teams worked for days pulling bodies from the rubble. The attacks continued through 2024, through 2025, and now into 2026. A relentless, grinding campaign of destruction against a city that has no strategic military value to justify any of this under the laws of war. In April of 2026 alone, just weeks before the university dormitory was struck, Russian forces killed at least 10 people and injured 49 in another major attack on Dnipro. And on May 3rd, the missiles came again. The mayor of Dnipro, Boris Filatov, has had to issue emergency declarations, arrange replacement trains for passengers whose routes were disrupted by missile debris, and organize emergency services to pull survivors from rubble, over and over and over again, for more than 4 years. His city keeps getting up. So do its students, because here's something the casualty figures don't capture. After every single one of these attacks, Dnipro's residents clean up, rebuild, and go back to living. Schools reopen. Dormitories are repaired. The university continues to function. Because the alternative, giving up, fleeing, allowing Russia to break the spirit of the city, is something the people of Dnipro refuse to accept. Let's be very precise about something. Striking a university dormitory is not a gray area under international law. It is not a complex legal question. It is not a matter of military necessity or proportionality assessment. It is a war crime. Article 52 of the First Additional Protocol to the Geneva Conventions defines protected civilian objects as anything that does not make an effective contribution to military action. A university dormitory, housing students and internally displaced civilians, is unambiguously a protected civilian object. Deliberately attacking it is a war crime under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Full stop. Now Russia knows this. Russia has known this since February 24, 2022, when it launched its invasion. And Russia has chosen, repeatedly, systematically, and apparently without internal hesitation, to commit these acts anyway. Because Russia has calculated that accountability is slow, that the ICC's jurisdiction is contested, that war criminals often outlast the courts that pursue them, that by the time the legal process catches up, years, maybe decades, will have passed. But here's what has changed. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin in March 2023 for the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. That was a historic first. A sitting head of state with an active ICC arrest warrant. Several ICC member states have already confirmed they would arrest Putin if he sets foot in their territory. Ukraine's own prosecutors have opened over 135,000 individual war crimes investigations. Each documented attack, each bombed school, each struck hospital, each missile into a university dormitory becomes part of a legal record that will outlast any individual ceasefire or peace deal. The evidence of what happened in Dnipro on May 3rd, the photographs, the survivor testimonies, the damage assessments, the satellite imagery, is being documented and preserved. Justice is slow, but it is coming. The attack on Dnipro's university was the most symbolically devastating strike of May 3rd, but it was far from the only one. In Nikolaev, a ballistic missile struck in the morning, wounding 5 people and damaging 17 private homes and a multi-story building. In Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of President Zelensky, a drone struck the entrance of a multi-story apartment building. 5 people were hospitalized. A fire broke out in a separate strike on a high-rise in the same city. In Zaporizhia, the city next to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, explosions rocked residential areas. Garages were destroyed. 9 people were injured. The city that lives in the shadow of a potential nuclear disaster also lives under daily Russian bombardment. In Kherson, the city Ukraine liberated from Russian occupation in late 2022, a Russian drone hit a civilian bus. 2 people killed, 7 wounded. And separately, a 46-year-old woman was injured in another drone attack in the same city the same afternoon. In the Sumy region, close to the Russian border and under near constant bombardment, 1 person was killed and 18 others wounded in the past 24 hours. A drone struck a police car, putting 2 officers in serious condition. In the Odessa region, 35 residential homes were damaged in the suburb of Chornomorsk. 2 more people were killed in attacks on port infrastructure. And in Latvia and Estonia, NATO member states, residents received emergency alerts due to potential drone incursions. Finland was investigating a confirmed airspace violation by an unidentified UAV near the Russian border. Russia's aggression is no longer contained within Ukraine's borders. It is spilling into NATO airspace. It is putting alliance members on high alert. It is forcing European countries to ask a question they have not had to ask since the Cold War. Are we next? I want to address something directly to the people watching this from safe countries. From the United States, from Germany, from France, from the UK, from Australia and Canada and Japan and South Korea, from everywhere in the world where life continues more or less normally while Dnipro gets bombed and students are killed in their dormitories. There is a temptation, understandable, very human, to feel overwhelmed by the ongoing nature of this war and to start tuning it out. To feel like you've already processed this, already understood it, already moved on to the next thing demanding your attention in an impossibly crowded news cycle. I understand that temptation, but I want to give you one number. Since Russia's full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022,
Ukraine's general staff estimates that Russian forces have suffered approximately 1,334,030 personnel casualties, killed or wounded. That's not a Ukrainian propaganda number. That's a figure corroborated by Western intelligence assessments and consistent with battlefield reporting. Over 1 million casualties, on the Russian side alone. That's the scale of what's happening. That's the magnitude of the conflict consuming an entire generation of young men, Ukrainian and Russian alike, while a student dies in a university dormitory in Dnipro on a Sunday afternoon. This is not an abstraction. This is the largest war in Europe since 1945. And the outcome, whoever wins, whatever the peace deal looks like, will shape the security architecture of the entire continent for decades. The students of Dnipro National University are not abstractions either. They are young people who chose education over evacuation, who chose to stay in their country and build its future even as missiles fell from the sky. They deserve a world that shows up for them. Not just in hashtags, not just in moments of outrage after a particularly striking image goes viral. Consistently, persistently, with attention that doesn't waver because a celebrity scandal or a sports championship briefly pulls the headlines elsewhere. A student killed in a university dormitory in Dnipro on a Sunday afternoon in 2026 in Europe. That is the world we are living in. And the question for all of us, in every country watching from a safe distance, is, what are we willing to do about it? At minimum, we can stay informed. We can refuse to let this story fade from our attention. We can share it. We can demand that our governments maintain their commitments. We can remember that behind every statistic is a person, a student, sleeping in their dorm room. Not anymore. If this video mattered to you, hit like. Subscribe if you want to keep following this story with honesty and depth. Share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening. The next video is already live. We'll see you there.